So brings us to item number 17, which is under discussion. Proposed new board policy, IKADD, content and credit recovery, and IKADDE, credit recovery application, and new administrative rule, IKADD-R, content and credit recovery, all shown in Exhibit D. Dr. Melton.
Yes, sir. That's a mouthful, isn't it, Mr. Gantz?
It is. I wish I'd have just said all shown in Exhibit D.
Well, we're going to try to couple it together in a package deal. So if you'll join me in Exhibit D, board members, and Dr. Hampton and Mr. Gant, you see, as Mr. Gant said, policy, a rule, and also an exhibit. So page 2 behind the memo, the first page that actually is the policy, you're going to see here basically some definitions. We felt it was important to define what we mean by content recovery, what we mean by credit recovery, and always make sure that we're in compliance with NCAA requirements for our student athletes. So hopefully if you go back and read through this, or if you've already read through this, the content recovery piece, you see that you're currently enrolled in this. So this is for students that may not be successful at the time of the instruction. So we catch it before it becomes a failure. And then beneath that, you see credit recovery defined in paragraphs 3 and 4 for those students who have taken the content and have not been successful, they've not passed it. And then you see the fourth paragraph, the impact, that there is no impact on the GPA, no increase in it. So you don't have an advantage by taking the credit recovery. And then the fifth paragraph, you see student athletes and how that is going to apply to them. Mr. Gant, with your permission, I'm just going to go through all this, and then we come back and loop around with any questions that board members may have. So page 3, just behind that, where you see the rule, again, you see some of the definitions, but this really focuses on how we're going to identify those students. So you see content recovery with how the eligibility is being impacted. You're going to see in the third paragraph the need, or the second paragraph, the eligibility with content recovery. The last sentence includes, however, school administrators may elect to limit participation based on the parent and legal guardian or the teacher recommendation. This is to make sure that guardians are well aware of what their students need, and also to make sure that administrators are actively involved with the process. Then you see a section on grading to make sure that we are not allowing a lot of time to lapse. So you see they were very specific here of what happens no later than 10 days after the date of the enrollment. What happens to seniors, what happens with satisfactory completion. So we're trying to be very detailed here in this rule to make sure that there's no question for interpretation, that parents and students can understand. The next heading you see, credit recovery, and this is again for those students who have failed a course and need to be eligible for the recovery of credit that they've lost. Beneath that you see the paragraph about the eligibility, of when it can be taken, making sure that the students must have obtained a grade of 50 or higher. Because if a student makes lower than a 50, that student was not successful with the content overall. So there really is a chance to recoup it in an abbreviated process. We make sure that we set the limit at the 50. The next page continues on with more of the information that includes with the rule. This includes about the completion of the application, which you're going to see in the exhibit to follow. Then you see that this is applicable for students in grades 9 through 12. This is not available to students in middle school or intermediate. It begins in the 9th grade because, of course, that's when the process for Carnegie credits to be secured by our students. The next section you see, instruction and curriculum. We try to make sure that we define these courses are based upon curriculum standards, align with our processes of our curriculum adoptions, and to make sure that there is available space, facilitators, which mean by teachers for that, and there's appropriate computer-based instruction to be supportive. You see another section on grading, and of course we have to make sure that we hit the EOC, the end of course exam requirements, and then you see some time frames of August 15th. Now you may wonder, well, what happens if August 15th actually falls on a Saturday or Sunday? These dates actually came from the State Department of Education of South Carolina, so these were not dates that we chose haphazardly. We're trying to be in compliance. You see the next paragraph, this is GPA neutral, meaning that if the student is, the GPA will not be affected by a student's grade in the course. Now you see cost. This district may elect to charge for credit recovery courses, but we have not defined there. That's going to be dependent on year to year. The last page, which has the exhibit, we felt it was important to make sure that there were different levels of responsibility and also engagement. So you see there's a section for our students to complete. We're trying to create some independence because, of course, this is working towards a profile for South Carolina graduate to make sure that they are taking seriously their courses that they're taking and the work which they put forward. The next section, you see the parent or legal guardian. And then you see the last section is the school designee. This may be the guidance director, it may be an administrator, it may be the student's assigned counselor. So it's going to depend on school by school. That finding the right person, but making sure that once this is completed, that the school has received it and has filed it and noted it. Before we open it up to questions, I have to commend Colleen Boyson, our math coordinator. But in addition to coordinating the math services, she also is our content credit recovery coordinator. So she wears several hats in School District 5. Colleen has pulled together a committee, and the committee is representative of counselors, administrators, to make sure that they have an active voice with this. Because of the volume of blue you see, this, of course, is getting us in compliance with what's brand new. This comes from the state uniform grading policy. We're trying to make sure we're in compliance with the uniform grading scale. So this took a lot of thought that Colleen and her team have put together. I have no idea how many emails were exchanged, how many phone calls were fielded in addition to the meetings that she held. So Colleen, on behalf of District 5, thank you for the work and the leadership that you have led. But you may have to come answer some very specific questions because this is intense kind of stuff. So Mr. Gant, that's going to conclude my official overall review for you for discussion for tonight, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Now, we open the questions. We'll go to Ms. Hammond.
I understand that it does not increase the GPA. So when a student and a parent make the decision to be a part of this program, it's really just to increase the child's knowledge of that content of that course to help them move forward.
We're trying to make sure that we give every opportunity to students to either recover or to either to recover the content or recover the credit. So trying to catch them during the interim or during the semester or during the year as we see they're not being successful, as opposed to waiting until the year has ended and the child has failed or the student has failed.
And where, I think it's a great idea, but where do you, like physically, are they in the classroom with the teacher, or do you have another room for the recovery subject?
It depends. It's school by school. We have changed our requirements in the last 3 years or so, requiring that a teacher is assigned, because before you could assign anyone that has a study hall to be the person responsible for coordinating this. Now it has to be a certified teacher within the content. We prefer it to be the teacher of record to make sure that the student is involved with having that. So that is especially true for the content recovery piece of it. And then for the credit recovery, there may be an assigned person at the school to supplement what the teacher of record is doing as well.
And one more question. Is this different than what we offer that's called seat time in some districts?
This is in addition, because seat time is about your attendance, which
Right.
Dr. Harris is responsible for. It's about making sure that you're on time for class, you're in attendance for the class. So this is actually your academic performance within the class of your assignment.
Could a student actually be eligible for the seat time recovery and for the grade recovery? Or not grade, but for the, because they don't get a grade.
I need to include Dr. Harris on that because the attendance.
You know what I'm saying? You've got a
changed
child
this
that's
year.
missed enough school that they need to use the seat recovery, which I've kind of always laughed at as a judge because they're not getting, see, this is really getting something. The seat time's just saying that they sat in school so that they can get credit, you know, after 10 days. So, but I wondered if you had the child that had also chronic absences, it doesn't negate them from being able to do this recovery so that they can get the subject.
That's correct. There may be an opportunity, and there are cases where, because of missed class time, that they could do, actually essentially do both of those and receive the credit that they're working toward for that particular class. So that could occur. That could be a
Okay,
case.
good. I was just hoping that would be an option
Yeah, it's
for the
an option.
child. They didn't have to choose.
And if you look on the rule page, the last 2 lines, students must have met District 5 of Lexington Richland County's high school attendance guidelines and the initial credit course to be eligible. So
I got you.
Dr.
So
Harris
they
takes the
really-
angle of attendance, but according to this policy, we've added this layer of responsibility.
And that's good. I
We're
really
trying to
applaud
partner
it.
together, hopefully, for the advantage of our students.
Have we had a lot of students accept this?
You know, a lot is a subjective number. Since the change of the 10-point grading scale, it has been less needed than it was before. When we were on the 7-point scale, Ms. Boyson would tell you we had much more activity, but now we've gone to the 10-point scale. It's not been as needed as before, but I don't have a number that I can.
That's okay, I'm just curious, but that answers my question. I was wondering about how we went down with the grading, that might have.
It made a
changed it.
difference. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Case?
Dr. Melton, to be clear, because we've mentioned GPA a couple of times, content recovery, credit recovery,
Right.
sounds a lot alike.
It does.
But you could impact the GPA in content recovery,
You could.
but not in credit recovery.
That's
You're
right.
basically doing the work required to receive credit for having taken that class without impacting the grade that you earned.
With content recovery trying to intervene,
Before
let's
it gets
imagine it's
there.
first 9 weeks, and it's a year-long course. If we can intervene there, it's going to make a difference during the rest of the school year. But with credit recovery, you've experienced and posted a failure, and you're trying to make sure that you go back and recoup it.
Ms. Hammond?
I'm sorry, I just thought of one more thing. You said it varies, like who actually does it. Does that teacher have to do that in their planning time? Or do they do it along with the class I'm already in there teaching?
It depends, and I regret to use that phrase, but it depends on the availability of the teacher. In some situations, it may be a department head who already has an extra planning period who picks up this responsibility. In some cases, it may be a teacher of record who actually is responsible for the numbers. You know, from one school to another, the numbers may vary. So if we see that one school has a higher need, that could be an assigned section for that teacher to be available during that time. And I can't say there's one standard way of doing it. It's based on assignment, but it's also based upon the review of the performance of students for past performance to try to predict the future.
And I'm just thinking about the teacher and their workload and, you know, still having their planning and still having their time to eat lunch. And anyway, I just wondered, so we don't have like there's not an assigned FTE that does that. Each school within their framework works it out how you do that.
Yes, ma'am. We actually made that shift. I'm going to look at college 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And once we made that change, and that actually came from the State Department. Once we made that change, we really have not had negative response or resistance to that because the teachers would prefer being involved with their students as opposed to outsourcing that responsibility to someone that doesn't understand their content. So rather than sending someone that doesn't have a background in that area, they're taking ownership to make sure they're intervening to make sure the student has the best chance to be successful.
Is this district to district, or is it, you said it from, the guidelines come from the state, so every school district has to offer it?
Well, it's within the compliance of the state uniform grading scale and the state uniform grading policies. But what we've done here in District 5 is where we had liberty to make it personal to us. So if you lay out side by side, for example, some districts have already passed theirs, but Ms. Boyson can tell you, we kept getting so many changes from the department that we decided, let's put this on pause and let it settle. So once the details settled out and we saw some stability in responses, then we felt comfortable taking our committee forward. But some districts actually passed this back during first semester, whereas we put ours on pause. So if you compare ours with neighboring districts, they're not going to be exactly the same. The parts that are required, they are the same. But the parts that we can personalize it to make it unique to District 5, we've taken liberty, such as the exhibit. That's all our expectations there. You are not going to find that as required by the State Department.
I like that. I think you've done a great job because this really helps the student. Whoever did it.
I commend Colleen and her committee.
Colleen.
Any other questions? I'm reminded by this is the discussion, so if you peruse through here and have questions next time, I'm sure you'll start putting them along.
May I add a point of clarification, Mr. Gann, if you don't mind? When I mentioned about department heads, remember, we are no longer adding an additional planning period, so it's in addition to their assigned duties in some schools. It's not as a separate planning period solely for that. Thank you. My apologies for the confusion.
So that brings us to our final item, which is to adjourn. I see a motion to adjourn. Ms. Bumgarner,
I move that we adjourn.
that's second. Anybody wants to? Mr. Keynes. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. We had a productive night.